So if you've been floating around the TF2 community like I am constantly every day 24/7, you've definitely seen this image before. This is the MadCap, a fictional 10th class that was apparently added into the game on launch and has been removed ever since. And if you're at the point where you don't know whether this is real or not,
That's a joke, lads.
it's all a bit of fun. This is just the TF2 equivalent of Greg or Simpson. But what if it were real? You know, I'd honestly describe YouTube to like a pig farm full of slop and all the fat little sloppy piggies are running their fat little sloppy feet to the end to get the fat little slop at the end. The pigs are YouTubers, the views are slop, and we're essentially just chasing slop forever. And this game is 16 years old, so new little piggies like me who are fairly new to the scene are always being beaten by the fat older piggies who have been playing this game for much longer and have essentially covered every TF2 topic possible. But for this video I'm actually really excited because to my knowledge no one else has covered this yet, and I'm essentially producing this at light speed just to try and get it out so I'm finally the first or something. Anyway, so we're going to be taking a look at the MadCap's design, what few images there are of him on the internet, and basically determining how he will play because of it. This is all just for a bit of laugh as the MadCap is not real, he was never real, and he's never going to be added to the game, so I can essentially go as wild as I'd like. As for reference, I will be using only the official TF2 subreddit. As October 4th, this is where the meme started, and it's all basically gone downhill from there. Anything posted onto the subreddit until now, I am personally considering canon to his design, and I will be taking that into account. So yeah, that's it for the intro, let's get into it. This is the MadCap. He has 225 health and moves at 125 movement speed, faster than the medic and spy, but slower than scout. His weapon loadouts are as follows. The SMG would have been his primary weapon, the grease gun would have been his secondary, and the club would have been his melee. The reason for his removal in 2008 is basically that he had a speed bonus mechanic that the Source engine just couldn't handle. You see, whenever the MadCap would hover his crosshairs over an enemy, he'd slowly gain speed onto them, eventually running faster than the scout. This would both build up and disintegrate at a similar rate. Being a melee-centric class, he could also jump higher and fall faster, just like Saxton Hale can in vs Saxton Hale. Now before we get into how he really played, I want to talk a bit more about his design and his origins. The number one thing TF2 is missing that is so incredibly important is a British character. Being the best race on Earth, many Britannians such as myself are incredibly outraged that there is no truly British character in TF2. There is of course a Scot, but we hate the Scots. So the MadCap would have been your quintessential British thug, opting for sharp close-range weapons over guns because it's what he grew up with. As being the best country on Earth, Britland is very strict about guns. So for those who don't know, because 40% of my viewers are American, and to everyone else who's watching this, hello. Socially, England is divided in two between the north and the south. Northerners are typically seen as rougher and more friendly and outgoing. A good depiction of this would be Barry63 or any other stereotypical British football fan you can think of. Generally, as a stereotype, the north is more underdeveloped and the people make less money, but they're also much happier. For example, if you're walking your dog up in the north, people will actively just come up and talk to you about their day, the weather, and all sorts of things like that. It's an incredibly nice thing. But then the other end of Britain, the south, is generally seen as posher, we make more money, and we are generally more refined. Notice how I said we, does this sound northern to you? The south is more culturally developed, however we're also a lot more miserable, having many more suicide cases, depressions, overworked, and all the other kind of stuff that Japan has. For your stereotypical southerners, you're going to want to think the royal family and more upper class people, as we generally keep this consistent tone of voice. One thing's for sure though is that tea is drunken across the country religiously. But as a social disclaimer to the modern day world that we live in that I hate, stereotypes are apparently seen as harmful. And that might be your American philosophy. Here in England, everything I just said is true. It's only mildly true and I'm only mildly sorry. So, out of those two descriptions, which one do you think suits the MadCap's design more? A rough, outgoing kind of ruffian, or a more refined kind of refinedian? The MadCap would speak with a thick northern accent and generally be more aggressive and rough. Again, this isn't playing on a northern stereotype, this is playing more on the fact that he's a hired killer. Other than that, with his physical design, he's going to be flailing his arms around a lot like Scout whenever he speaks to try and make his point across, and he's probably going to be missing a few teeth due to England. Maybe he's missing a front tooth or something due to a fight when he was a child or something. That seems pretty cool. Now, in terms of personality, he's obviously going to have quite a hard and rough exterior, but inside, I can't base that off this design alone. Maybe he comes from a really posh family or something and just doesn't fit in with their expectations. Actually, you know what, I like the idea of this, we're going with this further. So let's say he comes from a quite high-to-do British family, and he was always born quite rough and tumble. Maybe he doesn't get along with his ma, a bit like Sniper doesn't get along with his parents, but for different reasons. Maybe those fancy British streets moulded him into the thug he is today. Again though, I'm not really going to go over his personality as I can't really base that off this image. Okay, well that's enough of his global origins, what he sounds like and all that kind of stuff, so let's get into his actual gameplay. So what would his role have been? Well, I see many images and text essentially saying that he would have been a support class, so we're going to be basing it off that a bit. The name of his game was to get into the enemy's face, harass them, get behind the backlines, harass the snipers and spies, and then get out again safely. An important thing to remember is that this moveset has been crafted by hundreds of strangers on the TF2 wiki over the course of roughly 10 days. So I'm just trying to slim down his kit to what I personally think would work best in game. A redditor named MuleMangrove29 has made this incredibly helpful guide for all the players who weren't around when MadCap was in the game, essentially just going on about how he would have played. So those were his core mechanics, his reason for being, and the reason he was removed. So now let's get into his actual weapons. His primary would have been the SMG. Similar to Scout and Engineer, they actually have different stats for their pistols. Scout reloads faster, and the Engineer has more reserve ammo. It's essentially the same thing for the Sniper and the MadCap. The MadCap's SMG would have dealt 25% more damage and had a larger reserve ammo clip, as the Sniper only needs it for backup, but it's the MadCap's primary. Since the MadCap is a fast, melee-based, close characters kind of character, it would have made perfect sense for him to use the SMG, as the Scout was originally going to. The MadCap's secondaries are where the most of his gameplay comes from, and this is where things get really interesting. The MadCap would have possessed a grease gun, a single-shot fire weapon that could deal a big greasy ball of 50 damage and slow your target speed by up to 33%. This effect would of course linger longer the closer you were to the target, and the more of your speed boost mechanic that he had. The images used on the subreddit are of the degreaser, and I think that's really funny that the grease gun became a degreaser. Now you see, the MadCap is a little bit like Spy, in which he mostly uses his secondaries and his melee in order to get kills rather than his primary weapon. He had a slightly stronger melee than all the classes, dealing 75 damage per swing and inflicting 6 ticks of bleed. The bleed of course would negate the medic's passive healing, however the original idea for this is that the bleeds would stack. I don't think that's a good idea. So judging from this loadout, what would he have done? Well, if I'm entirely honest, I think this is a perfectly sick loadout, and I'd definitely love to see this implemented onto some weapons over various classes in the future. The name of the MadCap's game is Speed. He is to get into his enemy's face, rush them, deal the damage, and get out alive. A bit like Scout, but more melee focused. And unlike Spy, he'd have the tools to keep up, not only utilising his speed, but utilising the grease gun to slow down his enemies, meaning that he can deal more damage to them and inflict more ticks of bleed. While there are community-made side grades for the MadCap, I'd once again like to just go over the synergy of his weapons combining with his kit. The MadCap would spew his grease all over his enemies and then slow them down, meaning that he could deal more melee damage to them. While I don't think the bleeds should stack, I definitely think the more you hit a target, the longer the bleed should last. As his playstyle would essentially be slow down your enemy and bleed them out before they could get to a health pack. To balance this out, maybe he should have a slower melee swing speed. I've seen a few posts saying he should swing as fast as Scouts, but 75 damage that fast with 6 ticks of bleed, no, go to hell. A further addition I'd like to implement is that his melees should have an alternate fire which lets you charge up a heavy swing. A fully charged melee would inflict the enemy with the Shell Shock status effect, and it wouldn't deal any extra damage. The Shell Shock status effect would replace the bleed in this instant, and a Shell Shocked enemy would be locked out of receiving any and all healing sources unless from the spawn cabinet for 6 seconds. I personally think this is an incredibly good ability for a melee class to have. Considering how he is a support class, his design is purely to help the team. It's not necessarily to get the most kills and be top scoring, nor to soak up loads of damage, but it's to help the team win the game. You see, if I were to go on a small tangent and take inspiration from another one of my favourite attack support hybrid characters, Sombra from Overwatch, he'd maybe be able to play similarly like her. You see, Sombra can use her speed and her invisibility to get behind the enemy lines and hack health packs, preventing them from using them. The MadCap would essentially be able to do this, but only to one target at a time, as Shell Shocking another would remove it from the first. Now in terms of covering his community-created side grades, I'm only going to cover one, the Gas Grappler, as this one seems to have the most traction upon fans. Quite literally, the Gas Grappler would have been a single-throw projectile, a bit like the Demo's Dynamite or the modern-day Scout ones. Upon landing a hit on a player with the Gas Grappler, the Madmac would be pulled towards them, very much so like the grappling hooks in Manpower. If this projectile were to be reflected by a pyro, it would insta-kill the MadCap upon hit. This is essentially like some sort of reverse gravity grenade, as it would instantly pull the MadCap to the target. It wouldn't hook them on like the hooks in Manpower, but you know, it would pull them to them so he could inflict his nice juicy bleed. And finally, the last thing I'm going to cover, team synergies. Who would he work well with? Who would he work well against? Well, many on the memes of the subreddit say that he works incredibly well against Spy, and he also works incredibly well with Spy. And having 2 Spy counters, the MadCap and Pyro, wasn't really fair. I however also think he'd be incredibly good at getting rid of snipers. You see, he'd essentially have the same role as Scout, but with more focus on support and helping the team rather than just getting solo picks. He could, say for example, use the grease gun to slow down scouts so that spies could stab them, or he could use it to throw off snipers' aims, flinch them, he could target medics with his bleed, all the stuff like that. He'd essentially function like a pick support class, and to me that sounds incredibly powerful. And with that, we've officially covered everything I'd like to cover about the MadCap's potential unofficial fictional inclusion into TF2. I know by the time this video goes up it's probably been run into the ground a little bit, but I still think this is incredibly funny, as, you know, the memes of a 10th class have been going back forever, but this is the closest we're going to get. I personally love the MadCap's design and would love it if he were implemented. When I first saw the images and renders of him though, I did actually think they were AI generated, as it kind of looked like they were. But no, I believe this is a real render. Anyway, wow, this has taken me a while to make. It's currently been, 5 hours? And like I said earlier, I'm really hoping to have made this first, as YouTube is literally just pigs fighting over slop in terms of who gets there first. Early birds and worms and all sorts of bollocks like that, I guess. Anyway, if you're only here for the MadCap stuff, hi, I'm Lon'qudor, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later down the sunny road. But if you're not, and you want to hear a bit more about the channel and all that kind of stuff, stick around, I've got another extra minute in me or so. Okay, so, the Discord server. Yes, we are working on the official Lon'qudor community Discord server. It's all going to be related to crustaceans, because I think they're really cool. So, like, all the tiers are going to be like crabs and shrimps and things like that, and that's funny. The server is currently called Bottom Feeders, but I don't know if that's going to stay. I currently have a very, very small team of only 3 moderators. We're not taking moderation applications at the moment, but thank you to everyone who keeps asking. I'm going to be quite strict with who I actually give such permissions to. The server is not up yet. A couple of people are in it as early access, as we're just trying to figure out certain things, make certain chats restricted, you know, all the fluff. It should go up by this weekend if I'm good about it. Again, that's not a promise. I do actually have a funeral to attend to on Saturday, and yes, that's not a joke. So it will probably go up Sunday, maybe. Anyway, apart from that, I just want to say thank you for how well the last video did. The cult video. That was my fastest growing video ever, reaching just under 5k views in 23 hours. And because this meme is just on the verge of dying, I really hope this video does incredibly well as well. It's taken a very long time to make. I essentially leapt out of bed and thought, oh, that's a really good idea, and started scrambling on it. Okay. So what projects are coming soon? Currently, I know I previously promised a lot of things, but due to motivation, time restraints, and whatnot, I can't deliver a lot right now. I believe I have the first week of November off, and most of the promises I made will be delivered within that week. So that will be improving the medic, the demo night video, with the series I was talking about, demo night, a very long time ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, exactly my point, and all sorts of other things like that. The last 2 things I promised are stream highlights and the Q&A. So the Q&A I promised at 1,000 subs, and geez, we are very out of it now. And you see, I put out a poll a while ago asking if what people want to see, and the Q&A was the least voted thing. So I think, okay, only 300 people can watch that. That's not what everyone wants to watch. I'd like it if you did, but you watch what you watch. And the last thing, stream highlights. I've been streaming every other day or so. It's only 2.5, 3 hours a stream, and we have the most fun in the world. They are so funny. It just derails. Someone will send me like a jar of milk, and then the entire stream will just derail. I beg, come watch them. You never laugh so hard. And yeah, stream highlights will be coming eventually. But apart from that, that's all I've got for now. So thank you very much, everyone. I will see you later down the sunny road. Cheers.